Hello, everybody. My name is Chris, and I'm also known as Starrapter on my YouTube channel. And today we are doing the High Republic Hype panel for ForceFest. I'm super excited about this panel because I've been waiting a long time for these books, and they're coming out shortly, books and comics. Joining me, I have the Geek Static, that is Matt Wilson. I also have Steven Schinder for the Delayed Replay podcast.
Hello.
And I'm joined by Dominic Jones from the Star Wars Underworld.
Hello.
Before we get started, ForceFest is partnering with Make-A-Wish Foundation to help kids out. So we do have ways you can benefit them by doing donations. We have in the chat, you can go and click on that diamond V and you can put in the amount that you would like through the chat. Or if you're watching this after the fact, we have a link that you could go to through Making-A-Wish Foundation. So getting into the High Republic, yeah, right now we should have probably had most of the stuff out, but unfortunately, due to the current state of things, all of it has been delayed until January. So the High Republic is this huge initiative that has been teased to us for years now under Project Luminous, and it was finally revealed back earlier in the year. We are getting books and comics set 200 years before the events of the Phantom Menace. It's going to be the Republic at its height, as well as the Jedi at its height, and there's also going to be new villains and plenty of cool technology introduced. So I'm going to start off around the panel here. I want to ask each one of you what your initial thoughts were when we got all the news of what is to come. I'm going to start off with Steven.
So when this was being teased as Project Luminous, I was expecting something like super crazy metaphysical with the Force or whatever. But then stuff started coming out about the High Republic, and we started hearing, oh, maybe it's like 400 years before, but then it was like a surprise that's 200. And then like seeing the character designs and hearing the premise, it did get me excited because, like, you know, it's a new era we haven't seen before, so potential for new things, which should be fun.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I think is needed in Star Wars right now, right? We've been so focused on this very small time period. I think it's like maybe 80 years. And we learned from Kathleen Kennedy recently that it's like 25,000 years. So it is a nice little gap that we're going to get that we haven't had that large of a gap before. We're going to go to Matt from the Geek Static. What were your initial thoughts, man?
I mean, I was excited. I was thinking initially, I thought that maybe this was going to be the formation of the Jedi. I thought we're going to get, you know, maybe a young Yoda, but then Yoda's maybe 900 years is a little bit too young for the thought that I had of like, oh, we're going back, way back to the very first Jedi, before the lightsabers were a thing. Could be cool to find one of these old ancient Jedi temples where they, you know, they're dabbling around and they discover who they are, and then one of them breaks off and, oh, there's the Sith, but everybody's all luminous. We're luminous beings.
Yeah, that was the big tease, right? Is it had something to do with what Yoda was saying with this luminous. It's like, oh my gosh, we're gonna get something with the Force in here. I'm sure we're gonna get a lot with the Force, but like you said, I kind of like how it's set in that period where it hasn't been established even in Star Wars Legends / Expanding Universe. We haven't touched that territory yet. So I'm gonna end with Dominic. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought it was just crazy. One, how much lead up there was to this announcement. Like when you think about it, by the time book one comes out, by the time sort of the Jedi comes out, it'll have been over a year and a half since they started teasing it, and well over 2 years of development, which is, by my understanding, far more than they usually give to a Star Wars book. Certainly the most since something like Shadows of the Empire back day. And so it's crazy just the amount of work that's going into it. I loved in their like announcement videos how much they had the team all working together, whether it's the writers, the designers, everybody. And so it just looks like there's a lot of work and a lot of love and time that's going into crafting something truly unique, something truly exciting. And I'm just excited to see what the publishing can do when they're basically given a blank slate. They're like, we all understand the basic parameters of the Star Wars galaxy. Now go tell a great story. Don't worry about tying into a movie or a show or a game or other books. Just do your own thing. And I think there's, with the storytellers that they have on board, I think there's just infinite potential for great stuff to come out of this.
Yeah, real quickly, you mentioned the authors. I'm going to run through the list of everything. So releasing on January 5th, we have Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule. Then on the same day, we have A Test of Courage written by Justina Ireland. Then moving to February 2nd, we have Into the Dark by fan favorite author Claudia Gray. And next year, at some point, we have the High Republic Marvel comics written by Kevin Scott, who's known for his work on the Adventure comics. And we also have the High Republic Adventure comics from IDW written by Daniel Jose Older. So we got a couple more months to wait. But yeah, jumping off of Dom's point here, it's been kind of frustrating a little bit with the current canon when, the movies are coming out and there's stuff that is, the Journey 2 books, but you can't really connect a whole lot with some of those books because ultimately it's the directors and the writers of the movies that are telling those stories. So sometimes I feel like the authors have kind of been handcuffed with the stories they could tell around those. Like we've been talking on other podcasts about, The Force Awakens and when that was coming out, and you have all this time material now that's in that first year after Return of the Jedi. And that whole era is really fleshed out with the Aftermath trilogy and with all that. And at that current time, we were like, yeah, we want to get those Luke Skywalker stories a year before The Force Awakens, but we're a year after Return of the Jedi. So it's going to be nice and refreshing, again, to have these authors being able to tell these stories without any prior basis of continuity that they have to follow.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think is really exciting. You referenced the lead up to Force Awakens and the Aftermath books. I think whatever you think of those Aftermath books, I don't think that first one in particular got really a fair shake because everybody was so excited that it was the first book set after Return of the Jedi, and it was promoted as a tie-in to The Force Awakens. It came out on Force Friday along with all the other marketing materials like the toys and stuff, and so it was kind of lumped in with this. It was sort of given this task of selling, quote unquote, The Force Awakens without really being able to tie into that story, feature any of those characters, or really do any of the groundwork laying for it. And so now when you look back on those books or books that are set in a similar era, like the current Alphabet Squadron trilogy, you have a different appreciation for them because you're just judging them for their own merits. You're not thinking about how does this tie in with The Force Awakens? How does this tie in with The Last Jedi or The Rise of Skywalker? It's just how does this book work on its own? And that's the advantage that these books are going to have, starting with Light of the Jedi. I think I called it Sword of the Jedi earlier. Oops. That was a legend. That was supposed to be a Legends book.
Still waiting.
We'll be able to judge that book for its own merits. How well does it tell us its story? How well does it introduce this new era? What are the new characters like? Are they relatable? Do we like them? Are they interesting? Those are what we'll be looking at when we talk about these books, instead of going like, oh, I think this line here maybe sets up this movie or this show. And kind of really stretching and reaching. It'll just be, here's the book, here's the story, enjoy.
Yeah.
It felt like with a lot of the books there were a lot of teases. There weren't any answers given out. And unless, eventually you had the tie-up with Empire's End and then Aftermath trilogy, which for me was a little bit of a disappointment. But the Alphabet Squadron, I think Alexander Freed's doing a great job of doing his own story that's not too teasing to events that we kind of like, okay, well, what's the next book going to say? What's the next book going to say? And then, then we got the Rise of Skywalker, which now it's like they can just write what they want now. So that's High Republic. Really looking forward to that.
Yeah, what I like about the High Republic especially is the way they kind of promoted it from the get-go. This is almost like their own Marvel Cinematic Universe, but for just the books and the comics. Now, many of us that are old enough to know about the expanded universe, when it first came out in the early 90s, that was all people had, right? That was it. The movies were done, Return of the Jedi was out. There wasn't really any hint of Phantom Menace, and it was the Thrawn trilogy that kicked things off. And through that, we got many awesome series of books that carried through several years. And up until now, in the current canon, we haven't gotten anything like that. The closest we got is the Aftermath trilogy and Alphabet Squadron trilogy, and we're getting this upcoming Thrawn trilogy, but nothing more in detail. So what I like about this is there's going to be different mediums, especially with the way that the characters are going to transition. There might be a character in a young adult novel that ends up in a comic book, and then you see that character transition through different periods. And I hope, I think I have a lot of faith that they'll have standalone stories where you won't need to read every single thing. But if you do read every single thing, you're going to be way more rewarded and get so much more insight on that era of storytelling.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the ultimate goal for any of this interconnected storytelling, is to tell a story that anybody can just sort of pick up and go, yeah, this is awesome. This is a great little Star Wars adventure. But that also, when there's people who decide they're going to read all of it or watch all of it, they look at it and they go, oh, this character's from that book and that character's from this book, and this is how they work together, and this all ties together. And I think the way they're doing this, the way they're sort of structuring the story, that it all has to do with, it also starts from one big event, the Great Disaster. It feels like that is the perfect sort of jumping off point, because each book will show us different characters' reactions to that, and then all of those characters have to work from there. It's sort of like how we have historical fiction that is written out, based on historical events. There's tons of books written about like World War I or World War II. We all have a general understanding of what those historical events were, and then those historical fiction books come in there and they take characters and you see how they react to certain big moments that happened, that don't necessarily have to be portrayed in every single book, because people come in with a common understanding of it.
Yeah, it seems like these stories are taking place simultaneously, and I kind of like stories like that, especially if there's like this big event that happens, and kind of like how Marvel had like the Battle of New York that they mentioned like all the time. And it's like, oh, okay, so this takes place in relation to that, so this takes place alongside this, and I don't know, it's just a fun thing trying to connect it all and see where everything takes place in relation to each other.
Yeah, so there was an excerpt released a couple months ago for Light of the Jedi, and that's when we kind of first get a little bit more details on what this great disaster is. In the excerpt, there's a ship that is traveling through hyperspace, and all of a sudden hyperspace turns red, and the ship's like literally explodes, and that is the beginning of the story. That's in the prologue. There's scatters of the ship just flying in all different parts of the sector of space, or maybe actually even through all out the galaxy. So that is something obviously we haven't seen in Star Wars before. I'm happy that we're learning about different things that happen in the history of Star Wars that aren't big bombastic wars, because if you listen to what I think it was Yoda or somebody that said, like, there hasn't been Sith or anybody seeing in a millennium, there hasn't really been war until the Clone Wars that was huge.
I believe you're thinking of the great C.O. Bibble in The Phantom Menace, in Attack of the Clones, where he says, there hasn't been a full-scale war since the formation of the Republic.
There we go. So that's what's really cool, is we get this new kind of occurrence, and there's these new villains that are quite fascinating. They're called the Nile, and it's a collection of species. I think you see a Togruta and a Twi'lek and several other species. They're kind of like the Mad Max creations in the Star Wars universe, like these Viking punk rockers, like the way their clothing is. So it's interesting, because we're sitting here thinking probably like, oh, like we want Sith and all that. But hey, I got to give it to them. It's nice to get villains that subvert the expectations and are going to be quite something different. What do you think about that, Matt?
I think it's pretty cool. Where do these guys come from? Have they announced that in any of the excerpts or anything? This new villain?
No, they have not talked about them specifically yet.
Which is pretty cool. I like to go blind into these books. I don't read excerpts. I haven't even read chapter 1 yet of Light of the Jedi. I like to go in blind, be surprised, see the outcome. That way I don't raise up my expectations. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to these new villains, seeing what the Jedi do. I'm sure there's going to be a Sith sprinkled in there somewhere to just save it. They might be the ones pulling the strings. So that's going to be exciting to read. I can't wait to watch this story unfold with the High Republic.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Matt. I think I think the Sith are going to factor into this story. I think we're going to come to find out, this is just pure speculation from me, but I think we're going to come to find out that the Sith are responsible for the Great Disaster, that whoever is, Palpatine's mentor 3 times removed is going to be trying some crazy dark side stuff and will accidentally cause this to happen. And ultimately what's going to happen is the Jedi are going to be so freaked out by this, because they've talked in the promotional stuff about how this is the question they went into this storytelling or asking themselves that form the basis for the story that they're telling is, what do the Jedi fear? What scares the Jedi? while the Nile, I'm sure they're going to be worthy villains for the Jedi. I'm not sure they scare the Jedi. I think there's only one thing that really scares the Jedi, and that's the Sith. And not even necessarily the Sith. It's not knowing what's going on. So much is talked about in the prequels about how the Jedi can't see what's going on. They can't. Their vision is clouded, and I think that really freaks them out. And so I think when something horrific happens in the galaxy like this great disaster, the Jedi are really going to kind of panic about it and start freaking out. And what we'll ultimately see happen throughout the course of the High Republic is the Jedi begin the transition from these idyllic hero warriors, or not even warriors, protectors of the light, that they're supposed to be at the beginning of the High Republic, that we always heard about from Old Ben and in the sort of not legends, but the legends of the galaxy, the myths of the galaxy. They'll begin the transition from that to the more bureaucratic, dogmatic crew that we see in the prequels, because they'll be so freaked out by this event that they'll start changing their ways, and we'll wind up where we are in the Phantom Menace.
I think it's really interesting, jumping off that point, how we ourselves view the Jedi throughout the several years that Star Wars has been going on, right? You watch the original trilogy, and you're thinking about, if they ever make an episode 1, 2, 3, what would those Jedi look like? How are they going to behave? Yeah. And then you see them, and like you said, they're dogmatic. You think they're supposed to be at their prime, but they're really on their way out. So now we have the High Republic. What are the Jedi like compared to what they were in the prequels? This is supposed to be their time to shine. This is supposed to be, like you said, they're defending the galaxy. And in the wake of this great disaster, what does defending the galaxy look like?
It's going to be an interesting question, right? Is what does it mean? Because I don't think the Jedi will form an army the way they do in the prequels, but there's going to be some kind of sacrifices to their ways. And I think it's up to Charles Soule and Claudia Gray and Justina Ireland and everybody, Cavan Scott and Daniel Jose Older, to come up with that, and I'm excited to see what they've.
So we have a couple Jedi that have been officially revealed via articles on StarWars.com. So we have a Jedi named Avar Kriss. She's a female human, and she's basically like the pinnacle, shining example of what a Jedi should be like, apparently. So we have a character like her that is going to be a main character. I think in light of the Jedi, she's going to be the main character. So comparing her to let's say like Qui-Gon Jinn, like what kind of Jedi are these characters going to be like? And then you go over to another character, for instance, like Keeve Trennis, and that name might sound familiar to you. She's a young Jedi Knight. She was in the Dooku Jedi Lost book, or the audio book. And she was actually one of the, I forget the exact title. It's like the Lost 12 or something like that, or the Lost 20, some number. Okay. She's actually referenced in Dooku Jedi Lost. Kevin Scott put the seeds out there. So she's not a Sith, but what is she? She left the Jedi Order, and Yoda in that audio book mentioned he had great sadness whenever he thought about her. So even during this time, there's Jedi that become disillusioned with what is going on.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah.
I have a feeling they're going to be the politics. I think a lot of people like Star Wars politics, and a lot of people don't like Star Wars politics. So I think there's going to be a nice even balance between the two, because full scale war or not, these Jedi have to keep peace. So there's going to be violence. Surely they're going to be going from place to place, taking care of business violently. Of course, they're Jedi, so they're going to have to do something
aggressive.
Yeah, what I like about the Jedi are they're basically the Lone Rangers of the galaxy. So to give you guys a better idea of what is going on in the High Republic, it's the time of great expansion, right? Like they haven't settled in the Outer Rim yet, so they are moving from the core worlds to try to, I kind of liken it to like the Pilgrims for America or something. Like they're trying to go out and expand, and they set out these outposts, like there's a Starlight Beacon, stuff like that. So they're going out there to the Outer Rim, and so they're going to be exactly way different than they are in the prequels, where they're just sitting on chairs and just debating. Like these guys are adventurous, they're pioneers, they're going out like that, which excites me quite a bunch, because that could lead to some like really good adventure books in our future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I wonder if we'll have like the equivalent in these Jedi, or in this Jedi Order to the Prime Directive in Star Trek about not interfering, and because the Jedi going out there, it certainly will be very interesting and certainly lead to some great storytelling, but it also it raises some questions. If they encounter people that don't really want to be encountered, they don't want to be found, what's going to happen there? And again, we might start to see in some places the Jedi start to lose their way again because they're afraid of what happened. And they may make some poor choices as a result, and that could have to do with this. That could impact this expansion and cause them to again sort of retreat back into their temple there on Coruscant and not go out there and actually try and help people.
Yeah, that's definitely something to think about. I want to talk a little bit about what we want to think when it comes to seeing familiar Jedi. I think Matt mentioned it off the top, something about Yoda. So would you guys prefer not to see characters like Yoda and some of the other older living species of the galaxy that we know are Jedi in the prequels?
So I think because Yoda is alive, it's a given that he'll appear at some point. Like, if it's a cameo and they mainly focus on the new characters, then I'm fine with it. I do hope that we see more of Yaddle, though. like I legit think we're in for a Yaddle renaissance. I mean, Charles Soule himself, I think, put her in like a vision in his Darth Vader comics, and like she was mentioned in Fallen Order, and she was in the Lego Star Wars Skywalker saga trailer. So I think these are all hints leading to like a Yaddle renaissance.
Renaissance.
I love it.
I'm happy with that.
Get on those t-shirts.
Yeah, the Yaddle Renaissance. You get like a Renaissance painting of Yaddle, you put it on a shirt. I like it.
I mean, how
Like the flowing hair.
would you guys? How old is Chewbacca?
He is
He'd be a
200.
baby,
but-
literally.
Be a baby. I wonder if a little cameo with
Well, if this is like exactly or
Baby
around
Yoda is
200 years before Phantom Menace, I think it could be before Chewie's born. So I don't know.
Yoda's in it. He's gonna be.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
I don't know. I'm thinking in the the 8th book of the High Republic series, building off the popularity of Baby Yoda, they give us Baby Chewbacca.
Oh, you mean
And-
Lumpy from the holiday special?
Yeah.
Gotta love Lumpy. Gotta get Lumpy in there as well. Yeah. Cam Ray in the chat suggests that Chewie's creepy grandpa
the
could be
VR
in there.
headset. No.
All full circle. But the but in terms of having characters in there, my feeling, my hope is that they kind of follow the model that the Mandalorian has laid out for us, where season 1 of the Mandalorian was entirely new characters. Granted, they were in familiar settings, and maybe there was a little hint at one or two that we've heard of before. But by and large, it was just, here is a Star Wars story set in the Star Wars universe. There's the things that sort of show us that it's Star Wars. But all these characters, whether it's the Mandalorian, Din Djarin, or Greef Karga, Cara Dune, any of those characters, they're all brand new. And I think that's what the High Republic should do as well. In these first set of books, especially the ones that we know about right now, it should be mainly focused on these new characters, these characters that we're just being introduced to, whether it's Avar Kriss, Loden Greatstorm, Boryaga Agaburi. I'm reading all the list of names we've got here. Keith Trennis, Stellan Gios, Vernestris Rowe, Skier. It should be focused on them. And then once we get into the second phase of books, or maybe even push it off to the third phase, then maybe you bring in Yoda for an adventure. Maybe in phase 2 you have Yoda pop in for a camp. be a hologram. They're like, oh, we need help. Who can we call? And how about this guy? And then it's Yoda. Get him in there for something, just to get people excited. And then in the third phase, be like, all right, here's that young Yoda adventure that you've been waiting for. And by that point, again, just with the Mandalorian connections, by that point, who knows what we'll know about the Yoda species, from what we could learn from Baby Yoda, from the child, and how that can then be incorporated into this
that's a great
storytelling here.
example, because what you don't want it to be like, unfortunately, is kind of like Star Wars Rebels at points relied very heavily on cameos of characters that kind of took the spotlight away from your characters. Like, they put in there Lando, they put in there, especially with Ahsoka. I mean, I love seeing Ahsoka in there, but it became the Ahsoka episode whenever she was in it, pretty much. So they gotta deal with things like you said. I think the phase 1, just lay the groundwork for the characters, and then phase 2, then you can start sprinkling in and stuff like that.
The first sentence in the first book is like, Yoda sits alone. He's like, oh, okay.
Right up. Like, that's when you just throw stuff away. When I think it was Michael Arndt said this about writing The Force Awakens, was that he tried to include Luke Skywalker from the beginning in that movie, but anytime he brought in Luke, you lost interest in the new character. And so the solution that he came up with, that him and JJ and everybody at Lucasfilm came up with, I think this was actually Rain Roberts' idea, was to push Luke off to the end of the story and let you have an entire movie to be introduced to the new generation of characters. And I think that's what they should be doing here, with an entire phase of books where you give where you show us you show us these new characters, and you save Yoda, and you save any other familiar characters. Like, really, I think Yoda is really the only one who's like iconic. He's the only one that's going to get the big headlines. There's certainly other books or other characters from books and comics that could pop up in there. But Yoda and maybe Maz Kanata. We'll throw in Maz as well. The two of them, I think, could really get people excited, outside of the people who have already bought in and are reading the books. But and so I think they got to hold off on those two for a little while and let us get sad. But again, when they do introduce Yoda, I really hope they go off the board with him. Like, I don't want to see wise Yoda. I don't want to see Empire Strikes Back Yoda or even Phantom Menace Yoda. I want to see Yoda as like a teenager. I want to see him in his like leather jacket. And I kind of want him to be like Qui-Gon, where he and I want to see him. I want to see him be like Anakin, basically, or Qui-Gon, where he's like, "Yes, don't care about the council, I do.
I do.
Listen to them, I will not." I want him. Like there's that Clone Wars episode where he asks Anakin to help him escape from the Jedi Temple. And he says to him, disobeying the council, your expertise is. And so I want that to be like a little like kindred moment between Yoda and Anakin, where Yoda's like, once I was your age and did this a lot, I did, but, and keep it. I'm going to stop doing the Yoda voice now. Keep them, make it so that they, that's kind of like Yoda sees in Anakin a younger version of himself, and he sort of relates to Anakin's reluctance to follow what the Jedi would do, or what the council wants him to do, because that's what Yoda did. That's how he felt when he was a young lad of 630.
I'd also like to see Hu Yang, the droid who instructs the younglings about how to create lightsabers. I've been waiting for him to return ever since issue 8 of the 2015 Star Wars comics. On the letters section said, "Oh, maybe it'd be cool to have Hu Yang in a future story meeting Luke or something," and that has not happened. Man. So just throw him in this era. What if they're not going to do that with Luke?
Yeah. That younglings arc of Clone Wars, like, it ends with Hu Yang, like he references all of this stuff in it. And you're like, I want to know what you're talking about. Come on, David Tennant, get in the TARDIS and show us.
So I want to go over the actual time period of 200 years. Now, do you guys believe that is far enough removed? Because a lot of us were thinking, oh, it's going to be like a couple thousand or maybe like 500 years. And I think most of us were surprised when we seen, oh, 200 years. Is that going to be enough time?
I think we are so used to the far-flung past Star Wars stories taking place 1,000 or 4,000 or 25,000 years in the past. So since we're so used to that, this is why this feels like not far back enough. But if you think about it, like in canon, this is pretty much the furthest back we've gone. And you think about how, like, you know, in our history, like if the Star Wars movies are like 20th century or whatever, this is like 18th century, and things are pretty different 200 years ago, like technology wise. Now, I don't think technology will be super different in this, but it could be interesting seeing what may or may not have been developed yet, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. You see, I think it was a smart move on Del Rey's part to make it just 200 years, because we do have the Old Republic, and we see how the fandom reacts when certain things are touched upon and which things are not touched upon. For instance, Thrawn, a lot of people liked it. A lot of people from the expanded universe, you know, section of Star Wars are like, you can't take our character. So it's like, well, let's go 200 years back. We can have our own characters that we can develop, our own era that we don't have to worry about this old Republic with, you know, all these other familiar characters that, and you get the expanded universe fans like getting upset, like, you can't have that character. You know, they can do their own thing. You know what I mean? So I think it's a safe, smart move to make a new era. And like with the technology thing, yeah, 200 years, technology is probably going to be close to the same. And if you go back 10,000, 20,000 years ago, and there's still hyperspace lanes and nothing's changed, it's like, it gets a little goofy to me. But
yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, as a longtime player of, you know, Star Wars: The Old Republic MMO and player of Knights of the Republic and Knights of Old Republic 2, I've been so ingrained on the thought of like, oh, this is how the Old Republic looks and is. And yeah, I agree. Like, it didn't make a whole lot of sense that you go that far back in time. Literally everything is the same, basically. It's the same. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
And like Steve was saying, like, in canon, we're going to make 200 years look more believable. I mean, you look at the concept designs they put out there for a lot of the outfits, and even the lightsabers themselves look more like medieval. That was another thing they mentioned, is that the Jedi are going to be sort of like the medieval knights of the round table in a sense. So they got that kind of style. Their hilts are a lot longer. They even have like those prongs on the side. So it definitely looks a lot more elegant, kind of like Obi-Wan was talking, like a more elegant weapon for more civilized age and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, I'm ready to see how this goes. I'm ready to see 200 years. That's plenty of time. It's more time than we've ever had separated by a long shot in Star Wars. That's like double the timeline of what we have existing now for every story. So, pretty much.
Yeah, you put it in those terms, and all of a sudden it seems like a lot more time. Yeah, because I was like, yeah, I was expecting it to be further back. I mean, the rumor was 400 years at one point. And then they said 200, and I was like, wow, that's even less than we were thinking. And yeah, I think it's the right amount of time, because you can make a few connections, like we were saying, with Yoda and Huyang and Maz and characters like that, and bring them in. I certainly think that would make for that gives them a little bit of flexibility. It makes it possible to tie in. It also, again, it explains why the universe looks more or less the same, which makes it easier for people to jump into it. And the other reason I think is that they genuinely, I think they're saving the distant past for a more visual medium, whether it's a film or a TV show. There was the quote from Kathleen Kennedy that somebody referenced earlier, where she talks about how, you know, all the stories are set within, you know, sort of a small amount of time, but really the universe expands or goes, you know, crosses, you know, 25,000 years. And I think at some point we're going to see a film set in that year one of those 25,000 years that will be, you know, about the formation of the Jedi or early people who follow the Force. You know, when they first announced Rian Johnson's trilogy, a lot of people suggested, you know, this is the guy that made The Last Jedi. Maybe make the first Jedi. That should be his. That should be the first of his trilogy. And who knows what's really going on with the Rian Johnson trilogy these days? But I do think it would be really interesting if they found some filmmakers, whether it's Taika Waititi or somebody else, and said, "All right, imagine the Star Wars galaxy 25,000 years ago. Go." I think that would be really interesting. And so I think they're saving that for either a film or a show. And so the ancient quote unquote past that we're going to look at in the publishing for right now is only 200 years, which is still plenty of time, and gives them lots of space to play with, to show us a different kind of Jedi, but also make those connections back to that original to those Jedi that we've seen in the
go ahead, Matt.
It makes me wonder too if we've already had a little tease with location in the High Republic with Alphabet Squadron Shadowfall. We had Troith.
Oh yeah,
that was supposed to be the thriving planet of politics a couple centuries before the rise of the Empire. So
that is such a cool planet.
Go. I like it.
For anybody that hasn't read Shadowwing, it's basically a planet that doesn't have a sun in its sector or whatever. So it has a black hole. So it's like they have to have like lights at all time of day. It's insane. It would look so cool in a video game or live action of some sort.
I might be a little disappointed if it doesn't show up in the High Republic, just because it does say it's the center of politics centuries before the rise of the Empire. And then they all moved over to Coruscant. So we'll see.
Real quick out to the chat. Any of you guys, if you have questions, we're going to save like maybe 5-10 minutes at the end of this. So be sure to stick around for that. We're going to move on to another topic here. I want to talk about, now we know we've been talking about comics and books this whole time. Star Wars has been based upon movies and other means of things as well. Would you guys like to have the High Republic become more than just books and comics?
I get. Okay.
Go ahead, Steve.
I get the feeling that like if it does make the leap, it would be animation and maybe video games first. And then based on like how well those do, then maybe they'd assess whether to make live action shows and even a movie taking place around that era, maybe with different characters, but you could still reference like stuff that has happened and have cameos from some of the characters here and there. That's just the vibe I get.
I would hope they would do like with the expanded universe, the old Legends canon. They had the Shadows of the Empire, like I think you mentioned earlier, Chris. They had a game, they had the comics, they had the books. They even had a soundtrack. They had an original soundtrack, which was just released.
So good.
Vinyl. It just came out a couple weeks ago on vinyl for the first time. So let's get an old High Republic soundtrack. Stumbling over my words. I'm excited now.
Well, when they first announced the High Republic, what got me really excited was they showed all the publishers, and they had publishers from I think like DK and some like not anime, manga publishers and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, this is going to go into a visual medium, well, obviously with comics, but they're supporting it way more than anything that we've ever imagined yet. So I think they got to build it up first, that first phase or two, and then maybe test the waters of the video game.
Yeah, can I be just a little bit contrarian here and say that and say that I hope it doesn't. I'm certainly interested in someday seeing a real multimedia push where the movies, the shows, the books, the comics, the games, all of it is all on the same page and all driving towards one story. I hope to see that, and I think perhaps this could serve as a bit of a testing ground for some of that. But it's like I said off the top, what I'm really excited about with the High Republic is that it's the publishers just carrying the story. And I think once you move beyond books and comics into shows or movies or even games, you start, all of a sudden the big focal projects stop being the novels or the comics, and they start being these other mediums, which have larger audiences. Millions, tens of millions of people play Battlefront. Tens of millions of people went and saw The Rise of Skywalker. Tens of millions of people have watched episodes of The Mandalorian. Whereas, I don't know how many copies of Star Wars book sells, but I feel like it's more likely in the 100,000 range, maybe a million or maybe two on a really good one. But I'm spitballing there. I'm not entirely sure. If anybody has the information, please correct me. But it's not nearly the same. And so then if you say, okay, we're going to do a game or a movie, then all of a sudden the focus becomes on the game or the movie, and the books move back into that support role. And the books will always serve that role. I mean, we're still going to have tie-in books as movies and shows and games come out, and we should. I thoroughly enjoy those, but I also like the idea of saying to the books, saying to the authors, this is your space, this is your chunk of the Star Wars galaxy. Tell it how you want to tell it, and
I like
just
that.
go have fun.
But it'd be also cool to have toys and a soundtrack.
Yeah.
Keep the books as the center, but you also got your collectible figures and you got your soundtrack to listen to while you read the book.
I gotta get me a Loading Greatstorm Black Series figure. I'm telling you. But yeah, no,
absolutely.
I totally get it too. Like I'm really on the fence about this one. Because like as a huge gamer, like I would love to see some representation of this world that we read in comics like come to life and books come to life. But like you said, there's something really special about having like this smaller niche in the community that is really passionate about a certain thing. Like I love when I run into people like usually at Celebration or New York Comic Con that has actually read some of these books, because it's not often that I find somebody like at work that reads these books, but it's cool to have like this little like community and to be that passionate about something. But at the same time, like there's other people out there that might want to know those stories as well. So it's like, how do you keep that content exclusive just to those mediums as well? If it's like a really crucial story, I'm not sure.
And you can do tie-ins across the various range of Star Wars stuff without losing the focus. The characters can be referenced in other stories. The locations can certainly be visited in future movies, games, shows, whatever. And you can even do things like have let's pick a character from the list here. Have I'm not going to try and say that. Have Stellan Gios's something of Stellan Gios's there at Dok-Ondar's in Galaxy's Edge, right? So that when you're walking around at Disneyland and you go into that place and you're like, hey, there's the thing. And all the people who read The High Republic will be like, yes, this is our thing right here at Galaxy's Edge. Everybody gets it. And so, yeah, I think there's, I'm not saying don't do tie-ins and don't do crossovers with other stuff, but at least for the first little while, just let the publishing stand on its own in this era. Certainly take what's established in this era and throw it into future eras, but let them tell the main
I have no
story,
doubt
the main thrust of the
they
story.
won't make references all over the place because they've already done that. If you guys have read the Kylo Ren miniseries, or if you read the current Star Wars run or the Dr. Aphra run, like High Republic is getting dropped almost every single issue of those stories alone. So like they're making it loud and clear that, hey guys, we have this awesome new storyline that is coming your way in a couple months. So get ready if you want to know more about the High Republic.
Yeah, absolutely. And they should do even more of it.
Yeah. So at this point, we are about 15 minutes away from closing down the panel. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to shoot those in the chat. Okay, this is from Matthew. Here's my big question. If Dom is right about being afraid of being unable to see the future and the present, what is it about the inability to see what scares them?
Ooh. Yeah, well, I think it's one of those things where the Jedi have this ability, and they have this ability to see into the future, see what's going on in the present, and you take that away from them. I think they realize that means that something is wrong. You see that a little bit in the prequels, that I think it's Mace Windu in Attack of the Clones says to Yoda, he says, I think we should inform the Senate that our ability to use the Force is being diminished. And so basically you've taken something that they can do and you've eliminated it. And so they when that happens, they'd be scared because it means something is changing and they don't understand why. And so it seems threatening, even though there's nobody standing over them with a lightsaber going like I'm about to get you, I'm gonna get you. They just but it just means that something is out there that they don't understand, and that I think is what scares the Jedi, is things that they don't understand because they know so much and they understand.
Yeah, I think you're right
already
on the idea, not so much like a personification of like some kind of creature. Because when they show that, and they have a High Republic trailer, and they show like what scares a Jedi, and there's like these images of these demon-like creatures and whatnot. I think it's more like demons in their head, something mental that is exactly like they're so high up on their pedestal at that point, like, oh yeah, we got the galaxy protected, we're doing great over here, and then like one little thing throws it off, and it's like, uh-oh, we've been safe for like thousands of years, we gotta get back to solving things and whatnot. So
yeah, well, and you can certainly make the case that that's what goes on in the prequels, that the Jedi have lost control. And so and Palpatine's kind of genius is that he gets them to lose control without ever really showing a major threat. He gets them to sacrifice their ideals, makes them become generals. It puts them in situations where people turn against them. The people turn against them. The people of the galaxy don't like the Jedi by the end of the prequels. So Palpatine, that's sort of Palpatine's great accomplishment, is that he's able to kind of get the Jedi jumping at shadows, some of which are him, and some of which are probably them just freaking out because they don't understand what's going on. They know that this threat is out there because they've seen Maul and Dooku, and they know the name Sidious. But beyond that, it's just it's a big unknown, and that's ultimately what leads to their downfall, is because they don't know how to react.
That's for
when
certain.
they don't
We got another
understand
question
something.
coming in for our buddy Din from F105. I'm gonna direct this one over to Steven. What about seeing a young Plagueis, man?
Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? I mean, do we know like the lifespan of his species?
It's a lot longer than a human. That's all I know, I believe.
Verified that he's immune?
Right. Like,
We don't know that he's actually immune, though. Yeah, you're right.
I would imagine that this could still be before Plagueis is even around. Like earlier when I think it was Dom who mentioned like maybe Sidious is Master 3 generations removed or whatever, like that could be like Darth Tenebrous' Master if like the lineage is similar. So I don't know. Like I doubt that we'll see Plagueis, but then again the meme is so strong that the temptation is there,
Yeah, the fact that they haven't like canonized that Darth Plagueis novel by James Luceno, which is highly regarded by many fans of the books as one of the best books ever, right? Like I really thoroughly enjoyed that book because it just goes into so much with what happens with the Phantom Menace and Anakin and Maul and everybody that's connected to the story. So, we don't know how long the High Republic is going to go for, but what happens if they start going like decades into the future and they eventually get like closer to the Phantom Menace eventually? Who knows like where it starts? And if it starts 200 years in the future, they can play like a story that plays 150 years into the future from where the High Republic begins or something like that. So it's definitely a possibility. The more I think about it, the more I think it could be something plausible. Like he could have been.
Maybe we'll see baby Plagueis. That's what we need.
Just get baby versions of all the characters
baby
in
Jackson
there. That's the big takeaway from The Mandalorian.
Oh man, okay, we got another question. I'm going to direct this one to Matt. So we have Becca B from Tarkin's Top Shelf. She's saying, playing off of Matthew, Master Lene did her best to hide Sifo Dyas' ability to see different versions of the future. She was afraid they'd lock him away. Perhaps it's something they see and not something they don't.
Okay. Somebody else want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, absolutely. I think what I'm getting at, what I've been trying to get at is that the Jedi fear what they don't understand. And yeah, absolutely. If they see if somebody has a vision that says death and destruction is coming to the galaxy, they might that would certainly scare them. Absolutely. And because you have one of the things we see in Star Wars is that when people have those visions, sometimes they wind up creating them by trying to stop them. In Revenge of the Sith, right, Anakin has those visions of Padme dying, and it's through his attempts to stop that from happening that ultimately we wind up in the situation we're at on Mustafar, where he's force choking her, and she winds up dead. If he hadn't tried that, more likely than not, she winds up just giving birth to Luke and Leia, and they can all live happily ever after by the lake on Naboo. And so certainly the Jedi might see something that scares them, that they don't fully understand, and again, it may lead them to make some poor decisions where they start to sacrifice their ways in order to prevent the future from happening, and in doing so, perhaps
Matthew in the chat just came up with a really good
avoid.
example. He's saying Eno Cordova from Jedi Fallen Order. That was the master of Kanan's master. Forgetting her name right now, darn it. Not Kanan, Cal Kestis. Cal Kestis is Seer's master. Seer's master. Yes. He's seen something about Order 66, but he didn't quite understand what it was at the time. So there you go. Good pull. Good pull there.
Just like the darkness that could be within themselves too. If they lose track of their sight, then they could conquer the galaxy if they wanted to.
What do you guys think about the idea? Like, okay, we're talking so much about the Jedi. What would you feel like if we got a book about like a Sith character during the High Republic? Like, I've been thinking about this as we're doing this panel. Like, you have a Sith character that is going around, they get discovered by the Jedi, that they got to kill the Jedi, and the Jedi can't figure out how these Jedi died because they got to remain a mystery. So you have the machinations of these Sith that aren't supposed to be around at this time, but they are. They're just not being discovered. I think that would be really cool to have not just like the light side of it, but the dark side as well.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I would be there at midnight to buy that book.
It'd have to be like a stealth story.
Just to see, I'm a Jedi guy through and through, but just to see what the Sith are doing in this era, I think
it's
would
highly
be really
likely.
Interesting.
They're eating.
I mean, there is this really cool whiteboard that they had in the video for the trailer, and you look at that whiteboard, and they do have Sith on there clearly, as well as really a ton of other really cool things on there.
Oh yeah, I love that they had dinosaurs on there. I want to see some dinosaurs.
And then the great disaster.
We got the Varactals somehow survive. The Dewbacks somehow survive.
Yeah. The Krayt Dragons.
Yes. The Space Vikings are the villains so far, but there's probably going to be dark side users in there somewhere around. What's really cool is I had in my notes here, we do have not just Jedi that are familiar maybe, but we also have confirmed names of families. So we have, first off, the San Tekkas. I want to mention them briefly. The San Tekkas are going to be they're like the prospectors of the known galaxy at the time. They have the means and the technology to actually go out into the Outer Rim that's unexplored at the time to discover some things. So the High Republic kind of taps them and says, hey, can we pay you or whatever to help charter things to go out and discover things? So I think that's really cool. And also the Starros, if you guys are familiar with Star Wars comics, you have Sano Starros. Her ancestors are actually in this, and she's like a little engineer that's going around with one of the Jedi Knights row. So she's got these abilities, well, not abilities, but she's got some really good intelligence to be like a scientist, and she wants to know like how the Force works and stuff. But anyway, I just find it fascinating that it's not just a Jedi that we might see, but there's going to be names of families and the legacy that those families, like Lor San Tekka, such a big character that I wanted to see more of. But at least we're going to actually see what he came from.
Yeah, it's surprising that we're seeing more of his family before seeing more of him and his connection to like Luke and Leia and all of them. I would never have expected this 5 years ago.
I came out of The Force Awakens thinking
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, I can't wait to see more stories with this guy, and nothing. So yeah, but I'm excited to see what his family was up to 200 years earlier, and potentially laying the groundwork for what he does in those stories that we still haven't heard, and also tying in Sana Starros, who's one of the breakout characters from the comics, and was just very are featured very prominently in the Dr. Aphra audio drama. I think it's cool again to tie all these things in there again, because this era is going to be a lot of new, but to have a little bit of fun with these connections, I think just further cements it in the Star Wars galaxy. And it maybe it tells us stuff about the characters down the line. Sana in the sort of the backstory to the Aphra audio drama and the comics was studying to be an archaeologist. Maybe she's becomes interested in that because her family has this great history and legacy of working alongside the Jedi in this very pivotal moment in the galaxy. And it just gives us a little bit of insight into her backstory that could then be further expanded on in the
so Star Wars, as much
Star
as
Wars
I love Luke Skywalker, right? He's my favorite character, and he's a Jedi, of course, but there's so many other characters in Star Wars that aren't Jedi. They aren't Force sensitive. You got Chewbacca, you got Han Solo, you got all these characters that are just iconic, So we're talking about the Jedi here, but I want to see some really cool smugglers. I want to see some awesome bounty hunters. We know that's confirmed to be coming. There's going to be many non-Force sensitive characters. So that's what builds up Star Wars, is the universe, is the species and the professions of everybody around. And I think in that time where it's like everybody's trying to discover what's out there, I think that leads to a lot of interesting characters we could learn about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm just I'm going to be fascinated to see what a cantina scene looks like in the High Republic, and also how long it takes us to get one of those, because they seem to be showing up sooner and sooner and sooner in every new Star Wars project. The Mandalorian started with one, but absolutely, that the richness of the Star Wars universe is one of those things that has been so wonderfully expanded upon. There we go, especially in the books and comics. And so the High Republic, in a lot of ways, is, I think it's really the spiritual successor to the old expanded universe. Because it gets to kind of be its own thing, the way the old EU was, and they did their big, massive book, multi-book series like the New Jedi Order and everything. This is the first kind of example of that in the current canon, and so just to celebrate that legacy of what's come before in the publishing, this big project, this multi-book project, should show us just about every single corner of the galaxy.
One last question I just want to read off here from Becca. She's saying perhaps we'll see the pilgrimage to Jeddah and actually learn what those statues looked like in their prime. That's fantastic. Yeah, I would love to see those old planets. Yavin 4, you got the Misasi temples. What are those about? I'm going to wrap it up here, guys. Everybody in the chat, thanks for joining. Thanks for the questions. That was really making it. I love it. I wanted to make it like a real life panel here. And thanks for everybody that had put together ForceFest. Thanks for John for being the admin moderator on this panel. Everybody that put it together, because my first celebration was last year and I had an absolute blast and was really disappointed like everybody else that we couldn't do it. But at least we're able to get together in a capacity like this, because as much as I loved all the information dumps of the trailers and whatnot, I think, hanging out with Dom at the Star Wars Underworld booth was one of the best times ever. Multiple days doing podcasts, like guerrilla podcasts, like on the spot, was just fantastic. Yeah, so this was a lot of fun. I want to make the announcement one more time that we're doing donations for Make-A-Wish Foundation. You guys can go ahead and click on that diamond icon, and that'll bring up Vcoin. You can get 33% of your donations through Vcoin, or if you're watching this after the fact, I'll have a link for the page itself to go to My Wish Foundation. So we're going to get into the plugs here. What do you guys want to plug? We'll start with Steven Schinder. You have an awesome podcast called Delayed Replay. You want to tell the people about it?
Yeah, so it's a podcast where I invite different friends each episode, and we pretend that the movies that got delayed came out on time, and we review them as if they came out and make up details on the spot. So you can find that on Apple, Google, Spotify, and channel1138.com.
Yeah, as I was saying before we started recording, as the theaters are opening up near me, I've been having a nice ritual of listening to one of his episodes of an upcoming movie, then going to see the movie and comparing how close he was to actually hitting the nail on the head with their predictions and all. And we're gonna go over to Geeks Attic. Matt Wilson, what can you tell us about the Geeks Attic?
Go check out the Geeks Attic YouTube channel. I review Star Wars books, the canon universe, expanded universe books. I've just got my spoiler-free review up for Thrawn Ascendancy Chaos Rising on Tuesday. There's going to be a chapter-by-chapter overview. Go check that out. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, at the Geeks Attic. Hope I can see you guys over there soon.
All right, very good stuff there. And Dominic Jones from the Star Wars Underworld podcast. What can you tell us about that?
Everybody should listen to the Star Wars Underworld podcast. We record weekly episodes breaking down all the latest breaking news in Star Wars. Our most recent episode, we spent a lot of time talking about what's going on in the video games, and we had one of our favorite guests, Mr. Chris Abbott, aka Starrapter, on with us. We call him our senior tie-in materials correspondent, and we had a lot of fun talking video games, talking future of Star Wars, and just having fun. We do that every week. You can find new episodes on Friday mornings on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, and StarWarsUnderworld.com. And if you want to tune in live, kind of do ForceFest each and every week, we're live Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern over at Mixlr.com. That's mixlr.com.
Yeah, definitely go follow Star Wars Underworld. They give you all the news to the minute. You're going to love it. As for me, as I mentioned off the top, my name is Chris, aka Starrapter. I have a YouTube channel, and I talk a lot about Star Wars, but I also do some live streams and cover some games and do movie reviews as well. So that's going to do it for me, Starrapter, and my co-host Steven, Dominic, and Matt. Everybody, may the ForceFest be with you, and catch you next time. Thanks for checking out the video. Please hit that thumbs up symbol. It helps me know that I'm making content that you guys enjoy. And if you enjoyed this video, I also include 2 videos down below you guys should check out. And please consider subscribing to this channel. It helps support me, and it notifies you guys of when I get new videos up on the channel. You can also contact me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Starrapter.